You know, usually when we talk about measuring human intelligence, we treat it a lot like measuring the horsepower of a car engine.
Oh, totally. We just look at the raw numbers.
Right. We look at the test scores, the degrees, the technical output, and society basically points to that massive engine and says, well, there it is. That is a brilliant machine.
Which, I mean, that tells you absolutely everything about how fast that machine can go, but it tells you absolutely nothing about whether the driver is, currently steering it directly off a cliff.
Exactly. And that is the terrifying gap we are exploring today. Welcome to today's deep dive. Because when you step out of the sterile environment of a test and into the real world,
Into situations with actual breathing stakes.
yeah, exactly. Suddenly, that whole horsepower metric becomes very unhelpful. We find ourselves looking at this landscape of human decision making that is just incredibly murky.
It actually drops us into what psychologists sometimes call diagnostic muddy waters.
Wait, diagnostic muddy waters. What does that actually mean in the context of everyday decision making? Because that sounds like a medical term.
It does, yeah. But think of it as a situation where you have all the correct data, but the environment is so complex that your standard tools for, interpreting that data just fail you completely.
Okay, so like having the right pieces but the wrong puzzle.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Having the raw capability to diagnose a problem or to build a solution is an entirely different neurological process from understanding the long-term consequences of unleashing that solution into the wild.
Wow. Okay, so today we are opening up an ancient thought experiment that isolates that exact psychological phenomenon for you.
It's a fascinating one, too.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're looking at a piece of timeless wisdom. It's a narrative often titled The Peril of Knowledge Without Wisdom, or sometimes The Mistake That Awakened a Lion.
I love that second title.
Right, it's so ominous. And the hook of this entire text is just profound in its simplicity. It's
Yeah.
basically this knowledge can open doors. But without wisdom, it can also open danger.
And we are going to treat this story today not just as some old fable, but as a cinematic thought experiment tailored specifically for you.
We want to unpack why brilliant minds like people who are undeniably geniuses sometimes make the absolute most catastrophic decisions imaginable.
To get to the bottom of that, we really have to start with the setup of the story.
Yeah, let's set the stage. So the narrative begins in a small village, introducing four young men. And the text draws this really stark contrast right away.
Very stark.
Three of these men are highly learned, like they are the absolute academic elites of their time. They've mastered these difficult, esoteric sciences, and above all, they take immense pride in their intellectual status.
And for some historical context here, mastering those sciences in antiquity meant they possessed highly specialized, rare knowledge.
Right, they weren't just reading basic math.
No, not at all. Think of them as the equivalent of today's top-tier quantum physicists or, elite structural engineers. They possess knowledge that 99% of the population simply cannot comprehend.
Okay, but then there is the fourth friend.
The contrast.
Yeah, he doesn't have the formal education. He completely lacks the titles and the mastery of ancient texts. But what he possesses instead is this intense practical sense.
Street smarts, basically.
Exactly. A grounded ability to look at a situation, assess the variables, and spot a threat long before it arrives.
Now, the motivation binding these four together is pure ambition. They're setting out on a journey together through a dense forest, aiming to reach the royal courts.
They want to monetize their intellect.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are hoping to impress kings and secure massive wealth and status.
So as they're walking through the forest, the three scholars are, well, they're basically hyping each other up.
As guys do, right?
The first one claims absolute mastery over structure and form. The second boasts he has the power to restore flesh and skin to anything.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and then the third scholar tops them all, claiming he holds the ultimate formula to bring actual life into a lifeless body.
And the fourth friend just walks.
He just listens quietly.
Hmm.
But I have to challenge this setup for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Are we just doing the old trope where the academics are entirely clueless and the uneducated street smart guy is the real hero? Because, I mean, isn't that leaning a bit into anti-intellectualism?
That is such a crucial distinction to make, actually. The text is not arguing that education itself is the problem.
Okay, good.
The danger lies in how education becomes inextricably tied to identity.
Ah, I see.
For the three scholars, their specialized knowledge isn't just a tool they use, it is who they are.
So their egos are completely wrapped up in it.
Exactly. When your entire sense of self-worth is propped up by your intellect, Every situation you encounter stops being an objective reality and instead becomes a mirror.
A mirror. Wow.
Yeah, a chance to validate your own genius. The fourth friend isn't superior because he lacks education. He has a clearer view of reality because he lacks the ego that comes with the scholar's specific type of identity.
That makes so much sense. It really highlights the danger of viewing the world purely as a laboratory, because when you do that, a hazard isn't a warning, it's an invitation.
Yes, and we see that psychological trap snap shut when they stumble over a massive problem right in the middle of the forest.
Deep in the brush, the friends come across this heap of large, scattered bones.
Just lying there.
Yeah. And the first scholar, the master of structure, stops dead in his tracks. He sees this chaotic pile and immediately says, "Here is our chance. Let us prove our knowledge."
Not, let's keep walking, but let's prove how smart we are.
Right. So the second scholar examines the pile and he says, these seem to belong to a lion,
He identifies an apex predator.
a literal natural-born killer. And the third scholar's reaction, he smiles with excitement. He adds, all the better. If we can restore a lion, who will ever doubt our greatness?
They are looking at the remnants of a lethal threat, but their cognitive filter is so distorted by ambition that they only perceive a metric for success.
Which naturally triggers the primary conflict of the story,
Okay.
because the fourth friend, the practical one, feels this massive wave of alarm.
As anyone would.
Right. He asks the most basic, undeniable question. He says, why should we bring a lion back? If it lives again, it may kill us.
And the scholars respond by completely ignoring his question about the biology and behavior of lions.
They totally deflect.
Completely.
Yeah.
Instead, they attack his intellect. They mock him, claiming, "You are afraid because you are ignorant." Those who lack knowledge always fear what the learned can do.
Man, I want to dig into the mechanics of that dismissal for a second, because smart people dismissing a valid warning just because it comes from someone without the same credentials, that happens constantly.
All the time.
In boardrooms, in hospitals, during tech product launches. How does that blind spot actually work in the brain?
Well, the underlying mechanism here is a cognitive shortcut known as a heuristic, and it specifically manifests as credentialism.
Credentialism, okay.
Yeah. Human brains are designed to conserve energy. Evaluating a complex argument takes a massive amount of cognitive load.
It's exhausting.
It is. So to save energy, we often substitute the difficult task of evaluating the information with the much easier task of evaluating the source. We look at a degree or a title as a proxy for competence.
So when the degreeless friend points out the very obvious fact that a lion will eat them, the scholars don't evaluate the lion, they evaluate his resume.
Exactly. They experience cognitive dissonance. Accepting his warning would mean accepting that their highly prized knowledge is about to cause a disaster.
And they can't handle that.
No, to protect their identity, their brains reject the input entirely. They equate a lack of formal learning with a total lack of valid insight.
And because they refuse to see the predator, they plunge right into the methodical process of reconstruction.
This part is so intense.
It really is. The text describes this step-by-step restoration with a slow, deliberate pacing that feels incredibly cinematic. Like the first scholar arranges the skeleton, perfectly setting the framework of the beast.
Bone by bone.
Yeah. Then the second scholar uses his learning to restore the muscles, the skin, the fur. And right there on the forest floor, a complete, terrifying apex predator exists again.
It is massive, physically flawless, and completely lifeless.
The image of that lifeless predator introduces a concept we can call the capability trap.
Yes, the capability trap. The scholars justify their actions with a very specific chilling phrase from the text. They say, "What use is knowledge if we do not demonstrate it?"
That phrase is haunting. What use is knowledge if we do not demonstrate it? Why do we feel such an overwhelming compulsion to push a button just to see if it works?
Well, the compulsion comes from the dopamine loop of problem solving.
The dopamine loop.
Yeah, when highly intelligent people face a technical challenge, their focus narrows entirely to overcoming that specific hurdle. The process of figuring out how to do something completely eclipses the question of why it should be done.
Wow.
We see this pattern repeated throughout human history. Think about the development of complex financial derivatives that crashed markets in 2008.
Oh, that's a great example.
Or engineers building highly efficient algorithms that accidentally promote destructive content online.
Because they just want to solve the puzzle.
Exactly. The builders become so hyper-focused on proving the math works that the broader implications become invisible.
It reminds me of building a highly explosive device. It's like they're assembling a bomb just to prove they understand the intricacies of the wiring, completely forgetting to factor in the blast radius.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. And they're standing right next to the device. They are so obsessed with the mechanics of the how that the reality of the what next doesn't even register.
The lifeless lion is the wired bomb. The stage is set, the capability has been proven, and now someone just has to push the button.
Which forces our practical friend to take the only logical action he has left. This is where we reach the climax of the story.
It gets real very fast.
It really does. The third scholar steps forward, swelling with pride, ready to speak his formula and give the creature life.
And the fourth friend realizes logic has failed. He abandons the debate entirely.
Because there's no point anymore.
Right. He cries out one final warning. He says, "Stop. This is a lion. Once alive, it will not thank you. It will attack."
He is stating the objective truth of the creature's nature, completely stripped of any academic theory, just bare reality.
But the scholars ignore him again.
Of course they do. So the practical friend uses his street smarts, focusing entirely on survival at this point. He tells them, if you will not listen, at least wait until I climb that tree.
And even as he is scrambling up the bark to reach a high branch, the scholars are literally standing at the bottom, laughing at his cowardice.
That arrogance is just staggering.
It is. But the pacing of the narrative completely shifts right here. We move from the abstract world of intellectual theory into brutal physical reality.
The third scholar recites his secret formula.
And the forest goes completely silent.
The wind drops, and then the lion moves. Its eyes open. It lets out a roar that shakes the surrounding trees.
I mean, in a fraction of a second, the delusion of the laboratory shatters. The scholar's pride just vanishes.
Because before they can even turn to run, the lion springs upon them. It's awful.
It is a swift, devastating conclusion. Their profound learning, the very foundation of their entire identity, successfully restored life to the lion.
But that same learning was entirely incapable of saving their lives.
The tool they mastered destroyed them.
Yeah. And from the safety of the branches, the uneducated friend watches this horrific scene unfold.
He didn't know the great sciences.
No.
He'd never mastered any secret formulas. But his vision wasn't obscured by the need to prove his own brilliance.
That's the key. He could see the one glaring reality that three geniuses completely missed.
Practical sense saved his life exactly where scholarship failed.
Yeah.
And the aftermath of this climax forces us to sit with a really heavy, uncomfortable silence.
It does.
Because after the lion finishes its work and disappears into the woods, the fourth friend slowly climbs down from the tree.
Just imagine standing in that quiet forest, looking at the ruins of such immense potential.
It's chilling.
It really is. The text synthesizes a few critical life lessons here, offering a clear roadmap of where human intellect goes off the rails. Let's break those down.
Sure. So the first takeaway is that learning without wisdom doesn't just sit dormant. It actively becomes a hazard.
Because the capability to alter your environment without the foresight to handle the consequences is, well, it's essentially a self-destruct button.
Precisely. Now, the second takeaway addresses the blinding nature of pride. The lion wasn't a lion to the scholars.
It was a mirror.
It was a mirror reflecting their greatness. When we filter reality solely through our own desire for validation, we lose the ability to accurately assess threats.
That is so true. And the third, perhaps most vital takeaway, addresses the core of true intelligence.
Which is what?
It isn't just about knowing how to start a process. It isn't just about possessing the horsepower to execute a complex formula. True intelligence intrinsically requires knowing when to stop.
Knowing when to stop. I love that. And bringing this back to you, the listener, consider where the capability trap might be operating in your own environment right now.
Yeah, think about your own life or your industry.
How often do we push forward on a massive project, a new piece of code, a disruptive business strategy, or even just a bitter argument, solely to prove that we can win it?
How often do we get caught up in demonstrating our wiring, ignoring the blast radius?
We fall in love with the tool.
You really do. And knowledge is an incredible tool. It is the scalpel, the structural framework, the data set. But wisdom is the hand that guides the tool.
More importantly, wisdom is the hand that knows when to put the tool back in the box.
Yes. The source text leaves us with this reflective continuation that demands we examine our deepest motivations. It challenges the metric that we use to define success.
Do we value knowledge only because it can actively do something?
Because it builds, creates, and conquers.
Or do we have the capacity to value wisdom precisely because it knows when not to act.
In a culture that relentlessly rewards forward momentum and, visible output, the quiet power of not doing is almost entirely overlooked.
It's seen as a weakness. But as the story of the lion proves, the decision to withhold action is often the